I was thinking about being filled. Like, what does it mean to not be empty? Because when we're empty, we are often in a very miserable spiral of despair when we feel like we need something and then we fill that need and then we need it again, or we need some other form of filling. I noticed that for each one of us, we need some kind of filling with regards to our degree of peace, our degree of love, and our degree of joy. Those are all things that we try to fill stuff with, whether it's people, friendships, dating relationships, pleasure, whether it's sex, or it's video games, or it's alcohol, or whatever it is, the things that we try to fill our lives with to obtain joy, peace, and love. Those are the things that we look for, and we need those kinds of satisfactions. And those things aren't bad. Those things aren't bad to have peace, love, joy, pleasure. But the things we fill those things with also may not be bad at all. Sex is a good thing. Alcohol, well, Jesus made water into wine, so it's not a bad thing. Jesus often eats food we see in the scriptures and seems to like fish. So there's nothing wrong with food either. There's nothing wrong with the sunset. There's nothing wrong with everything that God has made, because in the Genesis account, God created it and said it's good. So the stuff he made is good. But the question is whether those things we try to fill ourselves with in order to be complete. I don't know where you look to for those kinds of fillings. When I try to find satisfaction, the first place I often look for it is in the approval of people. It used to be a lot more explicit before, like, oh, what do you think of that? Just itching to hear, oh, it was so good, David. Or when you played that cello song, oh, it was so good. Or when you did this speech, oh, it was so amazing. That, like, just aching and itching for the affirmation of people. And I found joy when I succeeded, and especially joy when I succeeded when other people told me that I couldn't do something and I proved them wrong. So that's where I found my source of joy. And I found peace in isolating myself. I found peace in video games and anime, watching sports, listening to music on repeat. That was one of the complaints my college roommates would say, because I often didn't wear headphones because I was selfish, I guess. But I would just play songs on repeat. And I had a kind of an awakening moment, because there's this area in college, this like study hall area, where everyone would usually just be sitting quietly and reading their textbook or whatever that is, right? So I would be just chilling, reading my textbook. And then I remember this football player, I remember his headphones, and he's on with his headphones, but his music is on super loud. And he's listening on repeat for probably about 40 minutes or more, Lady Gaga's Poker Face. It was just on repeat, as loud as possible, but he didn't know it was that loud. So everyone in the study hall is just like laughing. It was crowded too, but everyone's laughing. Like, it was so funny. He's just like, my poker face, and like on repeat the entire time. And I realized I am him. I am just like him, because I listen to songs on repeat too. And this guy just, unfortunately, just was listening, it on blast, and having a lot of people hear him listen to it too. But I had an awakening, like, I do that. And that's often how I try to find my escape. Yeah, is listening to music. Is music bad? No, music's great. God made music. Music is really cool. And also these really cool ears that somehow internalize the music we're listening to and processes it with our brain. The supercomputer made of organic matter. Yeah, pretty sick. So music is beautiful. And I noticed, though, that songs get old. And I can listen to Poker Face, but it's not quite the same as it used to be. Yeah. The only time I've actually heard songs get better is when I drank too much, and then Bad Romance was on. I remember they played it like twice in one evening at a bar, and the second time I was like, the song got better, But But usually, I mean, the songs themselves, they lose their luster over time. I mean, there's still songs like, oh yeah, I'm gonna wait a couple years. I'm gonna give, oh, that song was super good. But I remember lately, as I was listening to Spotify, and I have my older songs like the greatest hits of Red Hot Chili Peppers, or the White Stripes, or AFI, or Nightwish. Those kinds of songs, I've already burned through them the last 2 weeks. I was like, I don't want to listen to this anymore, because it was great in high school and in college, but it just doesn't do it for me anymore. I feel like I need different songs, and so we're always looking for something to fill ourselves with, and we get it. We get it even for that moment, and it's like, oh yeah, that fills me, but then it loses like its ability to keep filling you, and you have to keep filling yourself in different ways, right? I found, unfortunately, fulfillment in feeling better than other people. So I would often look down on other people. I would find fulfillment in chocolate and candy. And yeah, there's one time I remember I ate like half a box of See's candy, my mom's See's candy. I think it was probably from Easter or something like that. And I felt so sick after. But in the moment, I was indulging. Oh, this is so beautiful right now. Just each one was so amazing, and then I just felt so miserable after. Nothing wrong with chocolate. Nothing wrong necessarily with eating a lot of chocolate if you can handle it. But the question is, does that actually fill your soul at a deep level? And I found out all those things eventually lost their luster, and I found that. Sometimes people can suck. I can suck. We can all suck, and we can let each other down. And the people I was seeking approval from, well, there were times where they weren't very approving of me, and so that really hurt to not have that approval from people that I was trying to find it in. Or there are also times I didn't succeed. There are times where I came up short, and I was really dependent upon succeeding in getting this grade, but I didn't get that grade, and now how do I feel? So all the things that I was aiming for just keep coming up short. I found that isolation, even though it gave me a space from people, also made me more miserable. And I found the satisfaction of sex and booze to be fleeting and unfulfilling. So comparing myself with others actually did a bad thing in my soul, and it made me start to despise people, made me start to distance myself from people, and it was not good. I really didn't like how that was making me turn into something or someone that I didn't want to be. And I actually tried to find life in myself, but I just kept finding it was decaying. It started to deteriorate over time. And so our desires are like a black hole that constantly consumes stuff. We have to consume things. There's no such thing for any human being, in my opinion, to be able to sit in a white-walled room. Picture yourself in a room with white ceiling, white floor, and 4 white walls. And let's say someone just gives you food and water for the rest of your life, and you're good, right? Probably not. Like, that's usually how people go crazy, insane. People consider that a form of torture, to put people in isolation. And why is that? Well, it's because we're made in the image of God, and that means we're worshipful creatures. So that means we're not okay just like being still. We're not okay just not worshiping. We have to consume or have things to fill ourselves with. And that's how we're designed. We have to consume things in order to be sustained. St. Augustine, he says this really cool quote: because God has made us for himself, our hearts are restless until they rest in him. So our hearts are restless until we rest in him. So in other words, we are constantly trying to fill this God-shaped hole in our lives with people or things that actually cannot sustainably fulfill them. God actually created us to have life and have life to the full. When Adam and Eve are in the garden and they're enjoying God, they're enjoying each other, they're enjoying creation, there was fullness of life, and that was always God's intention. God is not some dictator who created us randomly just for the purposes of seeing misery. When you think about the universe, it doesn't really make much sense, right? I think I was talking to Clark But this idea of like, it just seems odd to think that we are on this random floating, rapidly spinning and rotating planet, and we're just pieces of meat like stuck on this random planet in this ginormous universe. Like, that seems odd. It seems odd that there's so much design in this universe and so much beauty and so much intentionality, and it just doesn't seem random. It seems like actually we're created here and designed for something beautiful. And that's why I think we can detect when beautiful things happen. When your kid tells you that they love you, or you see a sunset, or you see growth, or you witness something jaw-dropping. Yeah, these are beautiful things that I think very clearly say, that God that is on God's heart. God's heart is for these things. But these things have fallen and deteriorated over time, and sin has corrupted what God has intended. So let's turn to Jeremiah 2 in your Bibles, and we're going to take a look at what God is saying to his people here. So Jeremiah 2. Verse 11. Okay. Jeremiah 2, verse 11. Has a nation ever changed its gods? Yet they are not gods at all. But my people have exchanged their glorious God for worthless idols. Be appalled at this, you heavens, and shudder with great horror, declares the Lord. My people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spirit of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. All right. So this passage is at the beginning of this dude's ministry. His name is Jeremiah, and he is a prophet, and he is supposed to tell Israel that they are running away from God who loves them. Except the nation is not going to listen to him, and they are going to be shuttled off in exile to Babylon in a faraway land. And God's heart is for his people to know him and to be fulfilled with him. And what God is saying through Jeremiah is that, one, that his kids have forsaken him. They've forgotten about him, who is the spring of living water. So there's this spring actually in Israel, Hezekiah's tunnel, where there is this constant spring going through the city. And when I went there, I felt like I needed to drink it. So I was in the tunnel, there's this running river, and I was like, it can't be that bad, right? I mean, there shouldn't be any parasites in this, because after all, so many people have been drinking from this. So I drank it, and as far as I don't know, well, I don't think I have any parasites. I don't think. I mean, you would know, right? Like, there should be some discernible symptoms if you did. But anyway, there's this constant spring flowing through Jerusalem in this tunnel. And God is saying, I am like that constant spring of water, that constant sustaining giver of life. And water means everything, especially in that culture, because no water means no crops, means you die. So what they did was, on a rainy day like this, you would have these holes in the ground called cisterns. And it had a lid, and you take off the lid and you let it rain, and then you cover the lid, and now you have a kind of a temporary well. I mean, a well is you were digging down into the dirt to get to water sources underneath the surface of the ground. But in a cistern, you're just storing a bunch of rainwater, right? So the problem God is saying is that his people are metaphorically carving out cisterns. And so when they are looking at the cisterns and looking at the water, they're finding, oh, there's no water because there are cracks. And God is saying that if we're looking for anything that isn't him, it's essentially a cistern without water because it has cracks in it. If you think about anything you look to that isn't God to sustain you, although your family is beautiful, although your job is wonderful, although, name it, your hobby is like the most incredible thing you can think of, we all know that those things are subject to falter and failure. We know that it's possible that people can die. We know it's possible that we might have some kind of body ailment that prevents us from enjoying a particular thing that we like to enjoy. We know that all these things are tenuous and fragile, right? So they work when they work, but then what happens when they don't work anymore? What happens when we lose access to them? What happens when we can't drink from that well anymore, right? And I think for a lot of people, they, in a sense, get lucky because they keep drinking from these things, and they seem like their life is great. My life's good. I don't have any issues. I'm fine. But it's one of those things where I like this quote by C.S. Lewis. He says, "We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition, with infinite joy offered to us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased." So in other words, even the thing comparatively, like from the rest of the world, let's say you have an enormous access to money, right? And it feels good in comparison to not having money, right? But even if you had all that money itself, the qualitative experience of joy, love, and peace that you would try to find in that is going to actually very much pale in comparison to the love of God. And I think for each of us who have really experienced that personally, it is so overwhelmingly fulfilling that everything else doesn't look as amazing anymore. And it's not all of a sudden that now I don't like my wife or my kids or something like that. It's more of just, I am so overwhelmed by the well of life and water that I have and access to God for my soul, that I'm so full and overwhelmed. I can't believe that these other things like look so small in comparison now. You know what I mean? So it's not that we're devaluing our friends or family or our experiences and hobbies. It's just that we're settling. You know, and there's always like dating relationships where you'll say, you know, you see your friend, or I mean, you know, I don't know. I mean, we may have had our own experiences before, right? But there's a moment, right, where someone is settling for someone else, and you think, oh man, like you're settling. Like if only you knew who you could be with, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say examples, but in my life or the lives of others. But the point is, like, if you just knew what was on the other side, right? You'd be like, what was I thinking, right? And so that's what we have in God is we have access to something that makes everything look, you know, small. It pales in comparison. So we're looking for life. We're looking for something to keep sustaining us. And Ephesians 2:1, I'm just going to read it. You don't have to turn there. But it talks about how it is that we are trying to find things that aren't God. So it says, "As for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins." So the Bible says that we are actually spiritually dead, that God made us for himself, but that we actually don't want God. You and I don't want God from our birth. We maybe have a degree of interest, but as we progress and as we become adults, we generally don't want God. We might have a degree of interest, but when we do good deeds, it's never to really make God look good. It's usually to make ourselves look good or to make other people think well of us. We often do stuff, but leaving God out of the equation, right? So when it comes to the things that want to have us, John 10:10 says, "The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." So there are so many competing things that offer life to us, but we find they're a little disappointing. They're subject to falter and failure. But Jesus says, "I have come to give life and have it to the full." So that's actually God's heart for us, is to give us life and have it to the full, to make our joy complete. God loves us, longs for us, wants to give us life, and we are at war with him. But he has a peace offering for us. So Blaise Pascal, he has this really interesting quote. I'll just read it, but he says, "What else does this craving and this helplessness proclaim but that there was once in man a true happiness, of which all that now remains is the empty print and trace. This he tries in vain to fill with everything around him, seeking in things that are not there the help he cannot find in those that are. Though none can help, since this infinite abyss can be filled only with an infinite and immutable object." In other words, by God himself. So you can try to fill a black hole with matter, but you're going to run out of matter. That's essentially what he's saying. And if our soul is like a black hole that constantly needs to consume stuff in order to be filled, well, maybe it's not meant to be filled with finite things. Maybe it's meant to be filled with an infinite source that will constantly satisfy the longings of a black hole. So well digging, usually when you think of wells or digging cisterns or whatever, you're thinking of, I need something temporary that traps this water, but I know it's going to run out eventually. So this book we've been referencing called Connecting by Larry Crabb, he talks about this idea of well digging, this activity that we do when we make it a priority to feel good now. I need to feel good now on my terms. I need to feel whatever it is, elated, need to feel at peace, need to feel not stressed, whatever that is, I just need to feel good. So we demand control over our internal experiences and well-being. So Crabb mentions our commitment to satisfaction on demand dulls our awareness of the impact we have on others as we seek our pleasures. So he's saying that if we are going to completely indulge in the things that we really want, it will eventually make us incredibly selfish people if we let it go to that extreme. Laura and I have been watching this TV show, and it's really hard to watch, actually. It's called Quiet on Set or something. It's about Nickelodeon child stars. What? Quiet on the Set. It's about Nickelodeon child stars, and these are kids I grew up watching on TV, like the Amanda Bynes Show, all that, Drake and Josh, all these childhood stars, And what's horrible is, you see them, but they haven't talked about the things that actually happened to them. It's been like 20 years since these experiences have happened, and now two decades later, they're talking about it. But they're talking about how all these people, all these producers or executives were sexually abusing them, manipulating them, stealing from them, all this stuff. And it's horrible. It's horrible to witness, or just like you're sitting there like, I cannot believe that happened to Drake. That whole time he was doing that show, like he was being like raped. Like, are you serious? And so, you see the worst of well digging when it goes so far down the line that it's gonna, like the selfishness is gonna come at the cost of other people. It's gonna come at the cost of our friendships, our families, even what's best for us. And obviously that's a very extreme example of, I need to feel good now on my terms, even at the expense of this poor 15-year-old kid, who was very severely abused. But the question warring in our souls, especially if we tend to try to feel good now, we want to feel happy now, we want to feel at peace now. The question warring in our souls is, am I fulfilled? And the deepest fear is emptiness. I don't want to feel empty. So I need to keep adding to my life. I need to keep putting stuff in. I need to actually demand from other people. You need to cooperate with what I want, with my efforts to feel good, and also don't judge me, right? Yeah, affirm me and also don't judge me. Yeah, I've seen this in interviews with like the Whatever podcast. Have you ever heard of that? And they'll interview like the girls from OnlyFans and stuff, and they'll be like, saying, don't judge me, and just like, why is this a big deal? Kind of like this affirm my lifestyle thing. And what's so crazy is like one of the top OnlyFans girls just became a Christian lately. Yeah, so she deleted her OF account. And what I find so amazing is that she had this epiphany that the pleasure to be found in God is actually so much more than any venereal or sexual pleasure. Like it dwarfs any pleasure on this planet that can be offered, that she actually left all of her very lucrative career in OnlyFans to follow Jesus, But I think that's the power of the gospel, is that it can set us free and give us something that we've been longing for. This is what we were made for. Okay, so obviously, if we can't find what we're needing and stuff, we just kind of say, I just need a little bit more. And it leads to a false connection also with superficial people. And these superficial people, they have no higher goal in life than just enjoying life. So we've all maybe had certain experiences, like maybe these buddies that we have a very superficial relationship with, but they're my drinking buddies. Like, yeah, we play pool and we drink, and that's like my crew, right? But we're not actually going to talk about life or have deep, meaningful connection and talk about the things that we're struggling with, right? We're just gonna drink and have a good time, right? Nothing wrong with having friends and having fun, but the question is, what does that do to us if that is only the connection we are making with people at that level? It's the superficial aims of whatever reason we're hanging out is going to be affecting us. And also, if we go down this path of needing to be full all the time, well, it'll lead to impatience because we need something now. Unfortunately, our phones are very accessible for all kinds of stuff that we can have on a dime. It can lead to insensitivity, just not being mindful of other people's needs, because if they're in conflict with mine, then I win. Overindulgence and even greed. And turn to Luke 16, and we will start to wrap up. But yeah, turn to Luke 16, verse 19. Luke 16. 16, verse 19. Okay, so Jesus is going to make a comparison here between two guys. Jesus gives this parable. It's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And Jesus is going to talk about two guys. It's interesting because one has a name and one doesn't. But let's take a look. So Luke 16, verse 19. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. At his gate laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores, and longed to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. Yeah, it's pretty gross. Obviously, purple being a very sought-after color in the ancient Near East. So if you were involved in making purple clothing, you were very well off. So lived in luxury. And there's this beggar who's just waiting for crumbs to drop from this guy's table. And he has all these, open sores and stuff. And yeah, I don't know why, but yeah, dogs like to lick that. So yeah, if I've ever had a cut, my dog, for some reason, wants to lick it, which is gross. But anyway, even the dogs licked his sores, that Jesus is saying in this story. So verse 22, the time came when the beggar died. The angels carried him to Abraham's side. This is also known as paradise or Abraham's bosom. It's kind of like a holding tank before Jesus died and rose from the dead. So the rich man also died and was buried. In Hades or hell, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. So Abraham referring to Father Abraham, the first Jewish or Israelite, I guess you could say. So he called him, Father Abraham, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire. But Abraham replied, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides all this, between us and you is a great chasm that has been set in place, so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us. He answered, Then I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my family, for I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them, so that they may not also come to this place of torment. Abraham replied, They have Moses and the prophets, let them listen to them. No, Father Abraham, he said, but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent. He said to him, if they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. There's this parable between this rich guy and this poor guy. And the poor guy ends up in paradise. He ends up in heaven. And there's this interesting dialogue between a guy in hell and Abraham. And interestingly, the rich man doesn't have a name, and Lazarus does. And I think the point of that is to say Lazarus is known in an eternal way, where the rich man, he is unknown because he was only known in this lifetime, but it didn't have everlasting results. And so it's really a startling phrase Jesus uses in this parable, because he just says, like, dip the tip of his finger in water to cool my tongue. Like, that's not that much water. That's like a very minimal amount of water, but that's his request. Just like, can you just give a little bit? So what's going on here? Well, what Jesus is saying is that people essentially choose what they want. So this rich guy is not in hell because he didn't want to go there. It's because he wanted to go there. And you think, well, how did he want to go there? Did he really want this? But the point is, because he did not make God his source of water, then he will not have water throughout eternity, because that's what he wanted. He didn't want God, and his God was his wealth. So he was satisfied on this earth, but then he got what he wanted, and it ends up being the case that he is empty in eternity. There's no one in hell who wants God. Does that make sense? So it doesn't make sense to go to heaven, but you don't actually want God. What's the point? Because that's what heaven is to be with God. So this parable talks about how now Lazarus is going to be filled, but this rich man will not be filled. And it's interesting too. He's like, well, just have someone, tell my family members. But then the reply is, well, even if someone comes back from the dead, they won't listen, right? See, Jesus proves with his resurrection that he is the real deal. He proves that everything he said is legit. Anyone who can die and come back to life has my attention. Now, obviously, the question is, did he actually come back from the dead? That's going to take a whole another hour. But long story short, why is it that people are willing to die for their faith, even today, when it's so easy to say, no, I don't believe in him? The reason why is because people have their lives so radically transformed and filled by Jesus that it's undeniable for them. Because the resurrection proves that what he said was true. And if we are personally resurrected and our lives are changed, then that shows that the resurrection actually happened. Because we've tried everything to fill our lives with, that doesn't fill us. But when you actually have that thing that fills you, then you're not lacking. Then you don't feel like you need someone to dip their finger in water to give you just a taste of water. We have a fountain of living water for all eternity. So in order to avoid well digging, we're going to, as we've been talking about, believe the gospel more deeply, knowing that God is the satisfaction for our deepest longings, and also have a sober awareness that our selfishness can be damaging to people. In Psalm 42, 1-2, it talks about like a deer who pants for streams of water, and our souls pant for you, God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. Where can I go and meet with God? So just like a deer who needs water and is out in the wilderness looking for water, we are also looking for water too. And we read about it in John 4 previously, but just as a little review, there's this woman at this well. She's a Samaritan, so they are looked down upon by the Jewish people because they're seen as half-breeds, because they intermarried with the other nations. And so they're not genetically 100% Jewish like the southern part is. So she's more northern, and she is at this well. She's at this well, and Jesus approaches her. But usually, Jewish people would avoid Samaria. They would go around this region because they didn't want anything to do with them. And Jesus tells his disciples, we have to go through it. So he has an intention to meet with this woman. His disciples go away, and it's just him and this Samaritan woman there. And she's there in the middle of the day when it's hot. Why is she there? Well, we find out later that she's avoiding people. She's avoiding people because she's been married 5 times before. And that's the well, that's the cistern that she has been digging and trying to find her satisfaction. She's been trying to find love from men, and she has found that it has been unsatisfactory. And we don't know the reasons for those divorces. We just know that she's on number 6, and Jesus mentions that prophetically. And he says, the guy you're with right now, you're living with your boyfriend, but it's number 6. And then she says, you're a prophet, and they go into this discussion, right? But Jesus' point is this, is that you keep coming to this well, metaphorically, these guys, to be filled. But if you drink from my well, then you'll have streams of living water pouring out of you, and you'll never have to drink from this well. And this woman kind of misinterprets the metaphor, and she says, oh, where's this well? Because I don't like going to this well and filling up my bucket anymore, right? And Jesus is like, no, you're misunderstanding. I am the well. I'm using a metaphor. And so she says, oh, that's amazing. I want that well. And so she trusts in Jesus, and actually so much so that she goes back to this city that she's ostracized from. Again, she's in the middle of the day, and that's because people would draw water in the morning when it's cooler, but she's the only one at this well in the heat of day, so no one will be there. But she goes back to all these people she's ostracized from and is like, hey, I found the Messiah. And so they all come now too to drink from the well that is Christ. And that is why Jesus went to that woman. He went to that woman because she is just like us. Now, you may not have been divorced 5 times, but the longings of your heart are similar, that we do keep looking to the same places for things to fulfill us, and they just keep coming up short. But what if you were good? Like, what if you just took one drink and you're good through the rest of your life? That's what Jesus offers. And he offers that freely because of his death and resurrection. And it changes us. It changes us recognizing that we've been forgiven, and that actually changes us to try to bless other people. Instead of our selfishness, the love of Jesus transforms us to ask the question, how can I be a blessing, and point people to the source of living water? Let's pray.